Welcome to Santana True Crime. Tonight, I've got with me Jayson Blair from Silver Linings Handbook. I've also got former FBI behavioral, I just screwed that up.
Agent, FBI agent.
Agent, yes,
Profiler.
profiler. We've experienced some difficulties tonight. I don't know if you've noticed the Silver Lining Handbook, which is going to be our sponsor today, considering that mine decided to fail. But we're going to be talking about the Bryan Kohberger updates. It started out in my eyes when I saw the message to the New York Times reporter that popped up, followed by Bryan's valiant attempt to remove his plea. And Jayson, I know that you wrote about that on your Substack. So let's just get right into it.
Yeah. Where do you want to start?
So, let's start with this article or this message that was sent to the New York Times reporter. I know that Bryan has got a lot of time on his hands. It's been almost a year to the date that he entered into his plea. And now he's saying that his counsel wasn't adequate enough. They didn't understand some of the basic questions and the consequences of pleading guilty. And to remind everyone too, he not only pleaded guilty, but part of his plea was that he was not able to appeal this decision.
Yeah. My friends and colleagues, Brett Talley and Alice LaCour from the Prosecutors Podcast, wrote an article for our shared Substack on the day it came out. And, it doesn't a really good job of sort of breaking down some of the legal issues that are related to it. But one of the most insightful things actually came from one of our readers who pointed out to us after the article was posted that this was all happening only a few days before the anniversary of his plea deal. And, it kind of struck me, and there are probably lots of reasons for it happening now, for him reaching out to the New York Times. Maybe they reached out to him first. But at a time where we probably would have been focused on the victims a year afterwards, I don't think it's a coincidence that we were hearing from him. So on one hand, I think him filing it was not surprising in the sense that he did something to steal the attention from the victims. He took, or their families, he took their lives. They've suffered through all of this as he's sort of gone through the process. And then I just don't feel like it doesn't strike me as a coincidence that he took that from them again. So.
Yeah, and I thought that's one of the hard parts about the decision to just let him plea and not have to give. I think everyone kind of remembers when BTK had to, when he pled guilty and the judge walked him through every single crime and he had to give details in open court. And that's something that the public got to see. And then you've got cases like recently with the Long Island serial killer where he was part of his plea was he had to work with the BAU and provide them with insight and answer their questions. But in this case, we got nothing, which in my eyes, I think law enforcement, these are moments where they can learn from it, but also victims' families can have those questions answered if they want to. They don't have to go wondering. And I'm sure that the public, this was a very anticipated high profile trial that I'm sure everyone would have been glued to their TV to watch. And we've got nothing as well. And I know that sounds very selfish, but I think it's just true when you look at the amount of, oh, thank you, Jayson. Sorry, I've just got to laugh at tonight. You just popped up the Santana True Crime logo and stuff.
Always here to help.
Thank you. Julia, can you give us some of your thoughts? Sorry, I can't even talk tonight.
I see it a little differently in that, yeah, the public doesn't get we don't get our answers. The family doesn't get all the answers that they deserve. But he got nothing as well. And he knows it, which is why he's reaching out now saying, I want a public trial, because he got nothing. BTK got a lot. He got to stand up in court. He got to relive the crimes that he wanted attention for, that he wrote to the media about, taunted police. This was something that was very gratifying to him. Same with Lisk. He gets this grand opportunity to now be a subject of the elite behavioral analysis unit. He's going to get a lot out of that. Bryan Kohberger got nothing. And now he wants his place in the spotlight. That whole statement that he made to the New York Times is all about public attention, not really about justice, not one mention of the victims. So the way I see it is that, yeah, maybe we, the public, miss out on some things. The family doesn't get all the answers that they deserve, but clearly this is bothering him. He's ruminating about it. And I agree with Jason. I don't think it's a coincidence that before, it's coming up on an anniversary and he's now saying, listen, I need more attention again. And he's not getting it. So I think this is causing him a lot of consternation.
And that was part of the message that he wrote in there, was about how the public is demanding answers and blah, blah, blah. And I think you're exactly right. And I know this is a little bit off subject, but I don't know if you've seen the leaked videos of him in prison. Okay.
In his cell?
Yeah, he's one of the detention officers. I assume it's a detention officer. Took a video of him in a cell, and he's just pacing back and forth, and he's rearranging his little shelf that he has with his toilet paper. It's just now they've actually authenticated that it is a real video, and they're looking at going after charges for the people that posted it. But my point in saying that is that he's got a lot of time on his hands, and you're absolutely right. He's not getting attention, and other things are happening in the world. And pretty soon people are going to forget about this and move on to something else. And I'm sure that he's going to have a hard time dealing with that.
An interesting thing too, just jumping on the point that you were making and Julia was making, if I were looking for answers about what happened in Idaho, Bryan Kohberger would be the last person I would ask. One, because, there's plenty of evidence that killers are not transparent, right? And especially serial killers about things. But I think even more deeply, just people who commit crimes tend to not be particularly self-aware, who commit violent crimes, that you're probably going to get more answers from paying attention to the evidence than you could get even if Bryan Kohberger was trying to be honest with us about it. So for me, I know people talk about that loss, and I know for victims' families, they need very different things. And I don't begrudge any victim's family member from wanting the process to go however they need it to go to heal. But if you're just talking about us more broadly in terms of getting answers, I don't think Bryan Kohberger is particularly a good source for that. And I suspect the answer is probably pretty boring and simple.
Yeah. And we did 4 episodes on our show about Kohberger. And I know people are just like, we need more answers. We need more answers. And I'm not saying that they said that to us specifically, but after going through it and analyzing him and the crime, I feel like I have the answers, and I agree with Jason. They're pretty boring. He wanted to kill people. He was a serial killer in the making, even though that was a mass murder. He had fantasies of killing people. He had fantasies of burglary and entering people's residence and killing them. And I think it's hard for people. That's not a motive that people understand. We understand motives of financially motivated, jealousy, revenge. Normal people seem to understand and grasp those motives much better than this was a fantasy of his. And it had probably been something he had been thinking about for a long time, which is why he chose the course of study that he went into, which is why he decided to study burglary in particular and sexual burglary in particular. And so for me, I feel that I have the answers of why this happened. I think, it just, I guess, surface level, like I never truly understand, why someone becomes a killer or why they do what they do. I can't say I really truly understand it, but just as I feel that I understand it as well as I ever could. And I have to agree with Jason. And some of the family members may want to see this trial, others may not. I think everybody deals with grief and trauma differently, and the something that's right for one victim's family member may not be right for another.
Right. And that's understandable. And I think even though it may have been a slim chance, that anytime you have a trial, there's always the possibility of something going wrong, or for you to get a crazy jury, or them not to see it in your eyes. And so you are putting that risk on the table. And that's something that I think people need to appreciate, is that they did get a guaranteed conviction on this. And he's not going anywhere. He's not able to appeal. He's making his last ditch effort, but as we talked about before, that should not play out in his favor. We did get recently with one of the defense team's experts, Ray, who's a former homicide detective out of Arizona. He came forward and presented his findings on the cell phone data. And I don't know I assume y'all have seen these interviews.
I have.
Okay. I have not.
Okay. Well,
I'm aware of some conclusions, but I didn't see the interviews.
Yeah. So he met with Kaylee's dad, Steve, on a couple podcasts, and he was going through his knowledge that he had been able to develop with having some of Bryan's devices. He said that he found violent porn on his phone. But the really important thing in my eyes is that he was able to look at the data and to be able to determine that he believes that Bryan has been in that house before the murder. And he also believed that Maddie was the original target of this murder, which some of my questions were in this case is that, did he really know that he was going into a house and potentially murdering 4 people? That just seemed like a lot, and something that if you are planning it very well, that you would try to avoid and not happen.
I mean,
that's if you're planning it well.
Yeah, planning it well is the key word there, right?
Like, he's inexperienced, and as much studying as he wants to do, you can never account for the unknown, which is what happened. And I my opinion from the crime scene itself, it seemed that some things that happened that were unexpected.
Yeah, it was a mess from the get. I mean, it was fast, but it was a mess from the get. Even him circling around before, and then just logically, if you look at the flow of what happened, there were probably some unexpected things. And you listen to the witness statements, Xana probably caught him to some extent or heard him and either interrupted or somehow ended up there. It would not be an ideal plan, even if you were going in to kill 4 people. The one thing I would say though, I think there's a lot of evidence pointing to the idea, and by this I just mean probability, that he was targeting one person, right? Or maybe 2, but one person. And, I could even buy the idea that it's Madison. I think that could make sense for a lot of reasons. She worked at a restaurant where he went. There were all sorts of other things there. But I would say I am very cautious about taking seriously the claim of any expert who appears to be, and I don't know if this is true, but appears to be making comments outside their confidentiality agreement with the defense. So I'm really reluctant until I hear from law enforcement or see some kind of evidence to believe any of this stuff, because, whether you're violating the letter of a confidentiality agreement or not, I don't know what was in place. But certainly when you sign on to do this kind of work, there's, unless they've released you or told you that it's okay to do that. So that makes me, I don't want to say skeptical at first, but very reluctant to take any of that seriously. It may all be true. So I want to put that caveat on saying anything more about it. But, if Bryan was targeting one victim, I think a lot of things in the story would make sense, in the sense that, back to Julia's original point, he probably ran into somebody, had already decided he was going to kill someone. The evidence sort of suggests he's thinking about it before he even gets to that semester, and then ran into one of them and decided this is the one. And so when I think of that kind of story, I mean, what are we really going to get? What are we really going to get that's going to satisfy trying to understand why 4 sort of young, wonderful people at the prime of their life were taken from us? I don't think anything's going to adequately answer that. And he's certainly not going to be the one to adequately answer it.
Yeah. And I agree that we're always going to have answers. And I understand your speculation with this. It just made sense in my mind when he brought that up, that there's got to be, I understand he's not a good planner, but to go into a house with multiple people, I mean, gosh, he's got to be smarter than that, right?
No.
He's
not.
No.
I mean, let's not give him so much credit.
Obviously, he's not.
Maybe that's just my fault.
He's clearly not.
Because I'm looking at this from, okay, if I was a police officer or whatever, and we're going to go do a drug raid, like we're finding everything out about that house that we can. We're pulling the trash. We're finding out if there's dogs in the house, if there's children, elderly. We're putting all that on a chalkboard. There's all these logistics.
But think of what you're describing.
We're doing
experience, training,
right?
All
I know
these
which
things.
way the door is going to open.
Multiple
like
perspectives.
There's different views.
You're bringing in all your experience. You're bringing, you're looking at it through your lens. You're looking at it through experience. You're looking at it through training. He doesn't have this. He doesn't have any experience. He has some education, but he's never done anything like this before. And I'm not saying that he is challenged in a way that he's like, I'm not saying he's stupid, right, but I think we're giving him way too much credit for having this PhD, and he woulda, shoulda, coulda. He, certainly wouldn't have gone into a big house like that. And I think it's it would be surprising to me that he wouldn't know multiple people could possibly be in there based on the size of the house. But, it does appear he was surprised. And I think part of it, and what really made this whole thing fail for him in a very public way, is his grandiosity. He thinks he's smarter than everybody around him. And, we talked about his little comment or his statement to the New York Times. And my first 2 thoughts, I think Jason and I were texting, I'm like, he's profoundly self-centered and he thinks he's smarter than everybody else. It comes across. I mean, the words he chooses to use, he's trying to sound like he's very smart and educated and smarter than all of us. And I think his way that he committed this crime demonstrates that he thinks he's smarter, and he thought he had planned everything out. And he did in some way. We see some planning, we see some countermeasures that he probably read about in a textbook. Mm-hmm. But, his training and experience doesn't help him to plan for all the unknowns that you're just talking about, Cameron. Your training and experience and all of your colleagues' training and experience says this could go wrong, this could go wrong, and this could go wrong. So let's have contingencies for that.
Right.
So that's what he failed to do because he doesn't have the experience. He's never done this before.
And then you combine it, to your point,
that we know of.
Right. We combine it with the hubris, right?
Right. The grandiosity. Yes, absolutely.
Because if you look at it through a different lens, I think we give him a lot of credit because he successfully killed 4 people, which sounds very hard in a tight amount of time. There no blood evidence in his car, right? Other things like that he probably prepared for or did something related to. But we had a guy who killed 4 people in a house, dropped the knife sheath. In his Amazon account, he was buying a knife that fit the description of it. Right. He got caught on camera in his own car driving around the house. Where else are we? His selfie afterwards, turning the cell phone off, which is like reverse evidence, and then leaving a witness who saw him in the house. I mean, there's so many things in here that just suggest that he was not particularly well prepared for this. And it kind of, like, looking at the crime kind of makes me think that he probably didn't, and this is just pure speculation, kill anyone else because we would have instantly caught him. I mean, it just was not a very good crime. It is a very sad, tragic crime, but I don't think the Navy SEALs are going to be studying it for their next raids.
Yeah, and there's some clear mistakes. It was just, that was always a question on my mind, is of how much actual planning he put behind this. Like, when he was driving around, was he getting cold feet, or was he looking for some event to happen, like the lights go out, or watching I know they were on TikTok a lot, and if they had public accounts, again, this is just speculation, that would be easy to go on and see when people are active or not.
Or building up the courage. Building up the courage. That could also be a part of that.
Yeah. I don't know. It seemed to me that he's basically building up the courage and possibly waiting for the timing, the lights to go off, and that's when he decides to go in. That's what I took from that, but we can't get in his head, so we don't know with 100% certainty. But
and do you believe he's been in that house before, or had some
type of
knowledge?
Yeah,
it wouldn't surprise me if he had been. I mean, committing a crime like that, a home invasion where you murder people, a lot of times in the backgrounds of those types of killers, you do see burglary as a prior offense, not necessarily a sex crime, but burglary. So is it possible he'd been in there before? It's possible. It's also possible he committed other burglaries, went into other homes that people were either there or not there, but that wouldn't surprise me, but I don't think there's any evidence to me that has been released by the police or the prosecution that answers that question.
Yeah. And I think, it makes sense. And I understand what you're getting at. It would be easier to move around the house. But, what we know about the house is it was a pretty open house in terms of, I hate to use the phrase party house, but, there were parties with people and they didn't always know who was there. So I wouldn't be surprised, because certainly if you can track someone, you run into someone and you can track them back to their home. You can monitor what happens at their home. You can, if you're dedicated enough to something like this, I could easily see you finding your way into someone's home. And to Julia's point, it may have been just a visit, or someone could visit and steal something while everyone's still sitting there. There was one classmate colleague of Kohberger's in one of the documentaries who makes the point that she thought he lifted something out of her apartment.
I think that's in the police records too, an interview with her, that she believed he had been in there, had taken something from her. So burglary, yes, specifically in that house, I don't know. The other thing I will say is that I don't think it can be ruled out that he didn't choose the neighborhood first and surveil that neighborhood for whatever reason. It was a good distance away. He had been driving around and found it, and maybe saw a victim that go into that house, and he chooses it from that. You know, serial killers sometimes just find a hunting ground first and then choose their victim. So that's always possible. We don't know. We don't know how he made his selection.
Is that a question that you would ask him if the BAU was interviewing him, or?
Yes.
And I know that you said that you don't expect him to tell the truth. Is there a
Definitely not.
process to get the actual truth, or are you just asking these questions and seeing how he answers and trying to get more detail out of it?
Well, prior to conducting any interview, and we had talked about this on our show, and we talked about what the interviews with Rex Heuermann will look like. You know, obviously we're not there, so we can't say this is exactly what's going to happen, but I think we can give a pretty good idea based on our time in the unit. But certainly we'd want evaluations done on him, whether it's psychological testing, cognitive testing, have a physical done on him, IQ tests, all of that done first, and we would review that. But we would also want to have a complete history on him from childhood on. We'd want to certainly have interviews with his family, and we'd also want to have a really good idea of everything involved in the 4 murders. And that way, so when he does lie, because he will, we have enough knowledge to be able to interpret something that's not truthful versus something that's more truthful. So that was how we would do it. It's certainly not the same kind of interview as an interrogation. It's very different. It's a behavioral interview. So lies, sometimes those are interesting. What's he lying about?
What people lie about.
Yeah. Why is he lying about this? Because some offenders will lie about things that are pretty insignificant. You don't really know why. And so that becomes
something in their childhood, or some, what they had for breakfast. Why are you lying about this?
Or they just like to lie.
Yes.
Right. Will you call them out on
Israel
that?
Keys.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on how the rapport is. It depends on the person, the interviewer, and their skill, and the every interview is different. And you also, and I should say too, not everybody you can't just put anybody in there with the offender. You really have to find someone, or, a couple people that are going to have rapport with the person. Because, for example, an offender may not want to be interviewed by a female, and that will not be productive. Vice versa, they may not, or in contrast, they may not want to be interviewed by a male. A female interviewer may be more productive. But I think it depends on the situation whether you call them out. But it's not like an interrogation where you're slamming your hands on the table and say, tell me the truth, you're lying. It's like, well, wait a second. This is not what I have from this bit of information from your history here. One of your teachers reported that you did hit a child in elementary school, so, right. You would generally, probe in a non-confrontational way. Yeah. And it's not just one interview, it's a series of interviews, because you go back, you review your information, You go back in to get things clarified, to perhaps address lies that they told you, to continue on to another subject entirely. I think the whole time as well, you're also trying to evaluate if there could be additional victims.
Would the BAU request to interview Bryan in any circumstance, or would they just leave this alone as well?
It's possible. There's always different research projects going on, so it's very possible. One thing that I will say is probably would never know until many, many years later. And same with the interviews done with Rex Heuermann. It's very unlikely we're going to hear anything. There's not going to be a big report that comes out. Maybe someday somebody who participated in the interviews, bits and pieces and excerpts may come out at some point. They may be written about in research papers, but these types of things are held, they're very confidential and held carefully until the time is right to discuss them, because you are dealing with human subjects. So you have to be really careful with the information and the research you're conducting.
So no one's going to be taking that information and coming out with a book?
They shouldn't be.
Hope not.
Has that happened before?
Many years later. Yeah, many years later, after, things have already been leaked out, or videos of offenders have come out in, through FOIA requests or something. But it's so many years later. It's not, it's not going to be a year from now where a retired profiler comes out and said, here's everything I talked about with Rex Heuermann. That's just not going to happen. I mean, that would be shocking to me if it did happen. And it's not even going to be done by them, but I'm just using that as an example that it's going to be a long time before the public, we really know some of those results.
So eventually the judge will give his ruling on, I'll say Bryan's appeal, but his, what's it called? The help me out here with words.
Post-conviction relief.
Thank you.
So in theory, a judge could rule. It may not be ruled as even a sufficient filing, but he's been appointed new attorneys because he accused his attorney of ineffective assistance of counsel. So you're probably going to see his petition withdrawn and then something else filed.
And then he'll refile, but a better petition.
I mean, that is the most likely thing that will happen if he listens to his lawyers, but all bets are off with this guy about whether he's listened to any experts. So I don't know. I mean, if he listens to his lawyers, what I would expect is his petition would get withdrawn. It cites no case law, no justification for it. There's nothing legal. It attacks the wrong legal thing. It's attacking his conviction when it should be attacking his appellate waiver. So I suspect his new attorneys will try to convince him to withdraw that and then file something else. And plus, attacking ineffective assistance of counsel is really something that happens after you directly attack the conviction. So he's mixing sort of two things you don't strategically usually put together. So my guess is an ineffective assistance of counsel attack will happen at some other point. So that's where I sort of think it's headed. But it begs the question, why do it? I mean, his current attorneys could not have said that was a good idea. So comes back to...
Oh, he knows more than them.
Right. Yep.
Do you know why he actually pled guilty, or do you have any theories on that? Or do you think he was afraid of the firing squad that they're about to implement, or was this his
my
way
theory is he pled guilty because he committed the crime?
Okay, so you don't think this was like a control aspect?
No, I mean,
details to come out.
I mean, who knows why anybody pleads guilty, but I think what we really saw in terms of the timing of the plea deal, it was when their last sort of salvo of attacks on the DNA evidence and other evidence happened. That's when the plea negotiations started. So I suspect, it was just a matter of his attorneys convincing him that this was the way to get the death penalty off the table.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So it was
It,
as simple as that, as he didn't want the death penalty, and so he took the guilty plea.
while I
I
don't
mean,
believe he was tricked or
yeah.
the
Right.
way he describes it, and that, which is kind of ironic because he wants to come across as so smart, but he's saying, I was tricked, I was lied to. And if you're so smart, then how could you
Mm.
not catch on to this and know what you were doing and have a better understanding of the evidence against you? So, I mean, I think his attorneys were able to explain to him how strong the case was against him and the evidence against him, and to avoid the death penalty, this was in his best interest. And that's what he did. And now he's having the regrets because, as you point out, Cameron, maybe he's bored. He's pacing around his cell. He needs attention. And this gives him that opportunity. But the irony again is that he's now claiming, well, I was tricked. I didn't know, I was lied to. But, you're not smart enough to figure that out. So
Yeah. And I mean, if you think about the exercise of doing something like this, if we're right that, he just decided he wanted to kill someone and then executed it, that could serve internally a lot of those things, but at the very least, it's some internal sense of status or recognition or power, even if other people don't know your name. Well, what does jail do? It strips all of that away from you. You're no longer the center of attention. You have zero power. The other piece of status, which is hedonism, you have no fun either, right? So none of these things are happening. No self-indulgence, no control or power over anything, no recognition. So, what is a killer to do or a serial killer to do once you take those things away? Well, some do what Israel Keys did and they commit suicide. Some give interviews like BTK did with Kathleen Ramsden, and some apparently file very wild appeals. But I think it's about regaining that original thing that they were getting, or the
control.
second best. Yeah, control.
Exactly. So kind of the bottom line. I mean, he's not just asserting his incident or innocence. He's telling us that he knows this case.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Right.
smarter than you, and this is how he is getting back his control, and which is what he's lacked. And he had a lot of control up until his guilty plea. And once that was done, once he's sentenced, he has nothing anymore at this point.
All right. So I got a question. What about the other two girls that lived there? They did not call the police for hours. I know that Dylan was one of the people or the female that saw him walk down the aisle or hallway. She described the clothing. Do you think that was just shock on their? I know we're speculating here, but do you think they just were in shock during that time, or is there give me some help on this?
I mean, I've seen enough traumatic incidents to say that hearing that they waited that long does not come as any surprise to me. And then when the text messages between them have been released, the level of fear you could tell, the wanting to hide with each other, it's the phone, one of their phones being partially dead. I am not surprised at all. Just having, whether it's like a mass casualty event like 9/11, which I
Right.
was at, or it's something like, running into a loved one right after their family member's been killed. I think maybe because of my experience, when everyone was concerned about that long gap, I didn't find it odd. I didn't find it that odd. And
I
certainly
didn't
when I
find it
started
odd because
yeah.
what you were saying is, and just being in experiences like that and shootings, and when things are very chaotic, weird shit happens. And even trained police officers have done just almost comical things when they're
I
just
remember
stressed out.
this one shooting in Brooklyn when I was reporting there. And the guy was in the house and he didn't get shot. And he kind of like catatonically walks out the door before the cops have arrived. And he just kept walking and walking and walking and walking, and finally was stopped miles and miles, hours and hours away by some local, I think, folks. I don't know if it's a store person or a storekeeper or something like that, who just were concerned because he was just so dazed and confused. Did he have anything to do with it? Nope. Do people do weird things when they have traumatic experiences? Yep.
I don't find it suspicious. I think she did not know what happened. She's in her room. She thinks maybe something happened. She sees a strange person. She's intoxicated, likely. I don't know what her blood alcohol level would have been at that point or what her tolerance is, but there's a lot going on. It's the middle of the night. I think she was slightly paralyzed with fear, which is very normal when you're extremely frightened and it's dark. So I didn't find that suspicious. I agree with Jason. It's similar to other situations I've seen where somebody doesn't react quickly. I've seen situations where people react too quickly and they make bad mistakes too, because they're scared, they're traumatized, they don't know what's happening. And I don't think she knew. I mean, she did not know what was happening, and that's why she was trying to just wait until at a point where maybe she felt safer.
Yep. Safer, and maybe in the back of your mind, and I've definitely seen this with people, hoping that you wake up to find out that there was some crazy story that your roommates are going to tell you about what actually happened last night that you wouldn't believe, right? Oh, yeah. It wasn't that. And so, I mean, for me, I don't find anything surprising about it. I think for me, when I don't know if this was an episode with you, Julia, but the art on one of the episodes, I think it was an episode with you, was Dylan at the door with the door cracked open. Hannah Hill, the artist, wrote it for me, and that image just sticks in my head of the fear that she must have felt. And I think as outsiders looking at it, I think we should just be very careful to draw any conclusions about things that we may not have as much experience with, or probably don't have, because I don't want to rule out that other people have certainly been through trauma, but I think it's just very hard to make any judgments, nor should we.
Well, that point kind of brings me to another thought that I had is when we talk about how organized or how prepared he was and how he, quote, got away with murdering 4 people or however you want to look at it. If someone did call 911, he really was not, or he was very close to getting called. And I'm not blaming the people for not calling 911. I'm saying that it wasn't as a perfect crime as it's been kind of made out to be.
I don't know. Do you think he was? I mean, he was in and out under what, 10 minutes, 15? I mean, 15 minutes max.
You think about from this perspective, though, if
you're the former police officer
gets called and you've got units coming in from other directions and there's one car on the road, your likelihood of getting stopped is going to be pretty good.
Time in the morning.
And then especially once they review that, if they can start working the case right away and they're getting the surveillance footage.
A great example of how we read sort of magic into the behaviors of people after they commit a crime. I remember when the PCA came out, or the probable cause affidavit in the case, and they were showing, how he must have traveled this way from Pullman, then he went south and around, and it was this elaborate, thing to get rid of the weapon. And I had wondered, as we found out more, did he just see Dylan freak out and not go back the way he came and tried to go a different way? Because just having been there, if he had gone back the way he came, it would have taken you right through campus or right along the edge of campus. But the way that he did go took him away from it. So I sort of think of things like that may have very well affected what he did that night, and that it's not some kind of super genius escape plan. It's more like, the enemy gets a vote and you have to adjust.
Yeah. And
I mean, the one thing he did have is the element of surprise,
right,
and the knowledge of what he was doing, and nobody else had that. So he's at an advantage because of that. And those advantages played out to some extent, which is why they didn't catch him for a long time. Now, had 911 been called sooner, possibly he would have been caught sooner. But it's very possible. I don't know, but it wouldn't have prevented the murders.
Right. Absolutely. And I think what's so hard about right now is that some things are coming out, which I know haven't been verified, but people are still, we talked about this before the show, of how there's some of these minute details, like hair in Ethan's hand that did not belong to Bryan. And then people start not only speculating, but just taking those little strands of evidence, no point intended, and formulating these entirely new theories of how, oh, it's someone else was involved, or Bryan didn't do it. And Jason, you wrote an article on your Substack, or it's on your Substack, I don't believe you wrote it, about probabilities, and of how when you look at...
did in fact write that.
Okay, sorry. I can't remember if that was you or not. Great article. It's on the
True Crime Times.
True Crime Substack. But in the article, it was talking about how when you look at probabilities, and you're looking at the probability of the knife sheath and the DNA and all this other evidence, we should be confident that he's the one that's responsible, but yet people are clinging on to these other little pieces of evidence.
Yep.
Is that, can you explain that phenomenon, Jason?
Julia will tell me, tell you, and you know this. I'm a why guy. I want to know why, right? I want to know why, all the whys behind why things happen. What I love about probability is that it cuts through the why. I don't need to understand why people who like chocolate ice cream are more impulsive than people who like vanilla ice cream. The data bears it out, right? And that.
Jason,
you hit your mute.
Sorry, I was saying, where did I leave off?
Chocolate ice cream.
Chocolate ice cream, right? People who like chocolate ice cream are more impulsive than people who like vanilla ice cream. I don't need to know why. I don't need to know how. We just know. We study it, and this is a fact. And this is the beauty about probability. You can do research, and you can get a lot of data about something, and then you can make some suppositions, right? And those suppositions, they're not really suppositions. You can make some deductions or pull some data points. One that I think Julia gives as a great example that's just contrary to what you might think, that most of the time when there are multiple victims in a homicide, it's committed by one person. Doesn't make sense to me. I think it would take an army, but that's what the data says. And that's overwhelming data, right? Right. And so when you look at the probabilities, what is the probability that Bryan Kohberger's DNA is going to be found on the knife sheath? Is it possible that somehow on the sheath holding the murder weapon, Bryan's DNA could be found? Sure, it's possible, but the likelihood of it is relatively low when you look at the data that exists out there. You got to look at how many times have we had X, Y, or Z happen. So you're talking about relatively low probability. And then what's the probability that the same killer owns a Honda Elantra that just happened to be driving around the building or the house right before and afterwards? Well, that's also relatively low, right? What a coinky dink. And then what's the probability that Bryan Kohberger also just happened to turn his cell phone off during the murder window? That's low, right? And you could look at each of those things independently and try and attack them. But what you have to do is you have to use exponents. You have to multiply those things and see then what your likelihood is. And it's infinitesimally small. The DNA alone, it's small. But I'm sure there's somebody else who had a Honda Elantra in, the area. How many of them were out driving at 4 a.m. or at 3 a.m.? And then among those, how many of them were, right? And so you start to add all these things together and your probability becomes infinitesimally small. And so I think that part of the challenge is that we tend to look at, and Julia made this point beautifully, I think we tend to look at the possibilities. And when we should really be looking at the probabilities and not just looking at the probabilities, but compounding the probabilities to find the narrow percentage that exists. And, when you look at it all together, that's what a circumstantial case beyond a reasonable doubt is. There's just so much overwhelming evidence pointing in that direction.
Yeah. And when you take an isolated piece of evidence and then not look at what's most probable, but look at what's possible, and then you take another piece and look at not what's probable, but what's possible, and you keep doing that, you're getting farther and farther from the truth every time you do that. And that's what a lot of defense teams are designed to do. Oh, it's possible. They're trying to create that doubt, but is it really probable? And with criminal profiling, it's all based on probabilities. And unless we have evidence that suggests that this is an outlier, direct evidence, we have to go with probabilities, because if we don't, we will be wrong. Not to say we haven't been. There are those outliers, but they're so rare. So you have to stick with the probabilities until you have evidence that this was in that rare occurrence. And like Jason said, so many people think, and we see this time and time again with many high-profile cases. I think one of the more recent ones, the yogurt shop murders, where people think because they have multiple victims, it had to be multiple offenders, and without evidence of that. And crime can be committed, and there might not be that evidence, but that doesn't mean that there were multiple offenders. But overwhelmingly, like 85 to 95% of homicides where there are multiple victims committed by a single offender. And if you had, two sets of DNA, or witnesses saw two people go into the house, or a victim described hearing multiple voices, those are the types of things. And you consider, well, maybe this is going to be something we don't see all the time. So it's not going to be what's most probable. And that's what's happening in this case now, with people looking at all the possibilities that their interpretation of the evidence could suggest. And when you do that, you're getting farther from the truth.
And one of the fascinating things to that point is a lot of this discussion of possibilities, and it's not limited to Reddit sleuths. It's limited, or it includes people who have credentials, like real credentials. They're talking about these possibilities, but not bringing any data to bear to suggest, A, that these possibilities are likely. And many of these accusations, and it's crazy to me because I've never been an investigator. Most I've been is a crime reporter. But I can listen to these things and sometimes just think to myself, have you ever been near a crime scene? That is not the way these things play out. Beat cops know this from holding scenes. And so, I unfortunately feel like we're at this point that you as a listener or reader just can't trust just that somebody has a credential. doesn't mean they have the experience. I mean, dig is what I would say.
Yes.
And I would also suggest too, if you have confusion about a piece of evidence or what it means or how you should be interpreting it, there's a lot of research out there. Sometimes it costs money to read it because but it's out there. So if you want to see, okay, what do studies tell us about burglars, and what do studies tell us about homicides with sharp edged weapons, and what does the research tell us about homicides with multiple victims? And I think that can be very enlightening. And that's what we relied upon at BAU. We didn't just go with necessarily our gut. I mean, sometimes certainly our own experience and what we've seen in the past comes into play, but you have to rely on the research and the studies out there. Again, if you don't have evidence to suggest that it might not fall into what's most likely going to be. And sometimes that most likely is counterintuitive. Like Jason said, you think multiple victims, you got to have multiple offenders. But most, if not all, homicide detectives would probably tell you, no, I've seen mostly with my multiple victim homicides, it's one offender. And again, it's counterintuitive to people that maybe haven't immerse themselves in this kind of work or worked, other things, problems brought up by defense. I see this a lot, and it has to be done. And when it is done, it does help those people who work in the crime labs and process crime scenes to work to a higher standard. But there are sometimes problems that are highlighted that aren't really problems. It's like normal standard procedure in a crime lab, flow of evidence and chain of custody and things like that get called into question. But if you've worked in a crime lab, that's standard procedure in every crime lab. And the crime lab's accredited, so they have to follow certain procedures. So that's also things to look at. Is the crime lab accredited? And did this person who's pointing out problems in a crime lab actually work in a crime lab? It's important.
No, those are really good points.
Julia, I often think about the case that you guys did on the show, and I'm going to have a hard time remembering it, but it was a man who went into the clothing store and ended up killing a bunch of women in the back.
The Lane Bryant murders.
Right, the Lane Bryant murders. And I think about that. If there hadn't been witnesses who survived and told us that, it was one guy and here's what he did and here's how he got all these people to come in the back at different times, I could easily see how people would be saying it had to be multiple killers. Like, it's a classic example. Your brain it's hard to wrap your head around how it could happen. But, I just think sometimes some of it too, some of the recent coverage that I've read, is just a failure of imagination. Like, I mean, there are people who are saying this must be this way because, and they're really not thinking of the many other alternatives that could exist. So
is that just people's inability to realize that some things are that simple? Like, kind of like when I was talking about of how, if it was me, I would have planned for X, Y, and Z and had all these contingencies, because you're thinking that in my head that someone that's going to do this is going to put that much planning into it, or it can't be.
I think it's also like comforting for Bryan Kohberger to be some sui generis, perfect master killer, because how many of those can be there? And it means it's probably not going to happen to me. I think psychologically it's a lot safer to think he's a master criminal. Julia called me out on this because I have her come on every October to do an episode. After a couple of years, I think the last one we did was the Idaho case, and she had pointed out that everyone we had done, and they had all been my suggestions, had been home invasions. Home invasions are a scary thing.
Right.
And I think it would be a lot easier if he was somehow super unique, and that he couldn't be the screw up down the street.
And I want to say too, back to your point, what you just said, it's not that simple. Like I don't want to say, oh, everyone should get this. It's that simple. I don't think that at all. I think it's very complicated. What I think happens is, you have experience, Cameron. You are looking at it through your world, your worldview, right. Your experience. This is what I would do. I wouldn't do that. We do that all the time. We do that when we are thinking to ourselves, well, how would I commit the perfect crime? And I would think of all these different things. Or we do that when we're thinking about how would we react if we were in that situation as a victim. Cannot do that. What we have to do is look at what does the research tell us, or how would this person in particular react based on their personality traits and their characteristics. That's what behavioral analysis is, looking at how is that person going to react, not looking at it through my own lens. That's really hard. So I don't want to say this is easy, everyone should get it. I think we have to set aside what we would do, how we would act. We don't know until we are in that situation, how we would act, how long we would wait, what would be afraid of. Like something that would make me afraid might not make somebody else afraid. They might not even notice something that I am going, that's a problem over there. So I think we have to remember, don't necessarily look at it through our experience and through our knowledge in our life. We have to look at it how that person that we're looking at would experience it. And, Kohberger had so little experience. He's just lacking. He had some academia, some of the things regarding forensics, he was particularly adept at because he'd studied it. He'd done some research papers at, and it's easy to know, I got to wipe out my car. I got to wipe off fingerprints. That's the easy stuff. What the hard stuff is the, I don't want to say maybe emotional impact, or what happens when the unexpected happens. That's where I don't think he's very skilled, is reacting to something that is unexpected. And I think that's where we saw the mistakes. And just his knowledge, there's just some knowledge that he had or that he lacked of how investigations really and truly work.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I think that whenever you do go into a house like that, and again, my own experience, a lot of times, even when you're doing all that planning, things don't work out like the way that they're supposed to. And so, we used to always you'd hear guys yell, compromise, compromise, compromise. And then that meant things have went to shit. And now it's time to just go to your training, and guys will problem solve and figure it out.
Well, and I remember this from
run and hide.
when we'd go reporting, whether it was like something really big, like we were going overseas to Iraq, or like a bunch of us were involved with photographers and going to some like shady place, we'd always have plan A, plan B, plan C,
right,
built on like decades of experience passed on by other previous reporters about what to do in these situations. And it comes back to Julia's point and all the examples we're giving. We have a team. We have different perspectives. We've got history and experience in doing the actual thing, right? Like, I don't think there's a class for how to kill people or how to, there's probably not a class on burglary. You're reverse engineering all of it backwards. And, you can have some inverse correlation problems there. But I think for someone, I think the part about him that I just find so basic and normal, I mean, and clearly he thinks that there's something special to him, is that he doesn't have that knowledge. He doesn't have that experience. Nothing about him being a criminology major should have even taught him that. But I think he had the hubris, right, to think that he could pull off this perfect crime.
And that kind of wraps it back up to, I guess where he's at with his legal filings, is that Do you think he believes in his heart that he's going to win? No clue.
No idea.
I'm waiting for something profound from you.
I mean, there's no way I'm getting in his head any more than I'm getting in your head or anyone else's.
Julia, how about you'll just schedule a visit for him, and then we'll do an updated episode.
Right.
I think he probably. I'm not sure if he's thought. I think what he's trying to do is just have some control and have something to do. So he's working on this now. Whether he thinks it's going to be successful, I don't know. But I think he knows I have a next step now.
Yep.
And this is going to continue to get me attention and keep my attention on something. And it is his way to continue to kind of externalize the blame, which is, it's not me. I didn't do it. I'm going to tell you, that all these things went wrong. And this is, again, not having no accountability and externalizing the blame on everybody else. And this helps continue that. So do I think he thinks he's ultimately going to be successful? I don't know that he's formulated that, but he's enjoying this.
Mm-hmm.
This is giving him something that was missing when he was just sitting in that cell arranging toilet paper rolls.
Yeah. And that's kind of the good thing that hopefully I know this is kind of a warped way of looking at this, but seeing those videos of him just rearranging his toilet paper nonstop, that's such a good thing that life is miserable for him and that he's in a cell by himself. And that's going to be the next how many decades he lives. I don't see him getting out in general population anytime soon.
Yeah. I mean, prison is not what I expected to be as an argument. not a good legal one, I don't think.
Yeah.
And I mean, he makes it. But I do lean toward the idea that this is about grabbing control and status and all those fun things. And I guess the sad part for us, the beauty for him is it doesn't really matter. Win, lose, you can always do something to grab attention. And I think we can see, we'll see this repeating itself in different ways to less of an effect over time. I like to think of Dennis Rader, and I know people have different opinions on this, but I think Dennis Rader pops up sometimes, to give interviews in part because, the light's off. Like you don't have control over something. But when someone wants something from you, like an interview with you guys over at the BAU or whatever, it gives you some sense of control.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Dennis Rader because when Rex Heuermann was in the news, Dennis Rader writes to Fox News and compares himself to Rex Heuermann, says he's a clone. Right. And on the surface, they have some similarities, but when you look at their crimes, their victim selections, their MOs, their rituals, it's very different. They're two different offenders, but this was Dennis Rader's way of getting back into the news, to getting attention, to controlling the narrative. This is what Bryan Kohberger is doing with this latest legal maneuver.
Yeah, I always thought that. Have you seen the word searches that Dennis Rader put out?
The word searches?
Yeah. He put out some word searches. This is after that supposedly had like clues of.
Oh, are you talking about before he was arrested?
Let me pull it up. BTK. Word. I guess word puzzle would be. Yeah, in 2004, he created a word search puzzle, and supposedly contained.
Mattel instantly picked it up.
What's that?
Mattel instantly picked it up.
Well, I mean, my point. I've seen people online like say they've broken his code and blah blah blah, but I think that a lot of it's just his way of getting people's attention, and just again, he's trying to get himself in the spotlight.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
I agree. I think Bryan is going to be, or Cobro, as you referred to him in one of your articles. He's going to try to do some things to get some attention as well. And you're right, he probably won't go away forever, but it'll get less and less. I think people will hopefully forget about him more and hopefully remember these victims.
Yeah, and I think it's probably worth noting that, and again, different victims' families want different things, but I do think less of a voice Kohberger gets for all the families, the ones who want to be public, the ones who don't, the ones, whatever they want to do, it gives them space. I don't want to say heal because it's the wrong thing, but it's space to find peace in their grief. And the more we're sort of like collectively sucking up oxygen about Bryan Kohberger, I mean, just having interviewed so many of these people, a ton of them are just consuming all of this information and paying attention to every detail and not having the opportunity to do their own healing. So I think, the best thing, it's not that we don't respond to the crazy things that are said, but whatever we can do to move on from Bryan Kohberger gives them some space to begin, the next stage of their grief.
Well said. Well, I appreciate y'all both coming on. Julia, you've got the consult. Do you want to tell us about your next guest or next case you're looking at?
Well, we just did 2 episodes on Jeffrey Epstein, profiling Jeffrey Epstein. And this week we start a 2-part, well, I want to say series, but 2 isn't really a series, but 2 parts on Ghislaine Maxwell, where we profile her. So that'll be coming out this week. And then we have a case coming up that we did a consultation with cold case detectives. It's on a case that is a lesser known case that remains unsolved from the 1970s. So those are our upcoming ventures. And we have I have pages and pages of case suggestions, and I'm always in the, some sort of stage of research and trying to get information about some of these cases to see which ones we could responsibly cover.
And you can get your podcast on Apple, Spotify, anywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah. We're
correct?
Yep. The Consult Real FBI Profilers.
All right. Mm-hmm. And Jason, you've got a couple things to plug, but you've got your podcast as well, Silver Linings Handbook. Do you want to tell us about what you're looking at?
It is just interesting conversations with really interesting people. Some recent episodes, I had Aaron Habel from Generation Y on for his investigative series, Framed, which focuses on the murder of Scott Macklem and the conviction of Timogen Kinsu, and kind of explore some of the flaws in the justice system. Paige Wilcoxon, who is also on Julia's podcast, was just on for last week, and she is a forensic psychologist and just a really interesting person. I've got some cool upcoming episodes, with Jennifer Eskew, former ATF agent, Virginia State Trooper, undercover. Lots of neat stuff. But my highlight of the year was appearing on 4 episodes of The Consult to talk about the case that I've talked about here of Ashley Loring Heavy Runner. So
yeah, I think people need to remember that case as well. And that's in my live section that we did together.
Mm-hmm.
We've done that case twice on this show now. But yeah, that's one people need to make sure they're paying attention to. All right. Well, thank you both for coming on, and especially getting through the technical difficulties with me. If you want to support the show, you can like and subscribe to Santana True Crime. You can also find me on Instagram and our social media at Santana True Crime. And if you would like to support me, you can buy my book, A Murder on Campus, A Professor, the Cop, and North Carolina's Most Notorious Cold Case. That is about the 1973 murder of Virginia Olsen on the campus of UNC Asheville. You can buy that book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, Audible, anywhere where you can get a book. Jason and Julia, thank you again. And thank you for everyone showing up in the chats. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.